Thanks, Jessica. All right. It's really fun to be with you guys today. I've never done an all-women's session before, and I have got to tell you, I'm kind of sweaty, and I can't really tell if it's because I'm pregnant or I'm just a little nervous, so this should be an interesting 45 minutes. But yeah, it's going to be really fun. I think we're going to have a fun hour. But if you would just pray with me, let's just start with the prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Yes, so as Jessica said, my name's Tina, and I live in Austria with my husband and our son, Ignacio. And yes, we call him Nacho, which in Austria, people don't know that that's a nickname for him, so they often ask if we named him after nachos, the meal. And I have to correct them and tell them that that is not why we named him that. But before we moved to Austria, I lived in Austin, and I got to serve there for 3 years. And being from the Northeast, getting to go to the South, it was like the best upgrade ever in weather, because it's warm all year round almost, and the people are friendly. Everyone is really nice. I didn't understand that when I first got there, and I was a little shocked as to, why everyone was nice and why they weren't in a rush, and I was confused why there was no Dunkin' Donuts. So one day every week our team would have a team fun time, and it usually happened Thursdays, and it was in the morning. So this particular day, my teammate Jeffrey was planning our team fun, and he decides to take us to the park. There's a really big park in the center of Austin. And we decided to just have a picnic in the park. So we're having a picnic, and it's beautiful. And when you go to a park, what do you see? People running, people with their dogs, someone reading on a bench, whatever. So we're sitting there, and we're sitting on the blanket, and then one of our other teammates goes, I think we're about to get run over. And I'm like, what do you mean get run over? And we hear this grunting, and then we look, and there are a group of people running towards us. And actually, what it was a group of moms pushing strollers, and also we call them the Stroller Stampede. And they looked like they were about to run in our direction. They veered to the right, and they got in a really intense circle, and then they started running and doing like squat runs around the strollers. And my guy teammates are sitting there, and they're like a little horrified, I think. They're like, what are these women doing? And I'm sitting there thinking, one day I'm gonna be in the Stroller Stampede. And this was at the time of my life when Michael and I were engaged. And so we were getting married a few months later. So just thinking about our future and thinking about getting married and having children, God willing, one day, I was excited to be a mother, and I was excited for what that would be. And at that time in my life also, as I was getting ready to get married, I was so afraid. And what I was afraid of was that God had given me these amazing women in my life. Through my years in college and through all the time when I was single, through my years in Austin, he had given me amazing friends to accompany me, and that became my housemates or my teammates, my roommates. And I was getting married, and I'm thinking, God, I have to leave these awesome friends, and I have to go move in with this boy who I can't share his clothes, and he does not know what earrings look good with what outfits, and he does not know how to make popcorn. And till this day, Michael's like, can you make the popcorn? And it was just, I was like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Like, I'm losing all of these amazing friendships. And so today, I'm gonna just hopefully inspire you and share with you a little bit about friendships in my own life, from college time to my missionary life to now as a mother and being married overseas, just the importance of great friendships in our lives. And to start, before we can even really talk about friendships, we have to start with the virtue. Yesterday, Sarah was talking to us a lot about virtues, and virtue is like the first and foremost kind of foundational aspect in our friendships. So the Greek word for virtue means excellence. And maybe when I say virtue, you think of Christian virtues. You think of, things in the Christian life that we're trying to live out. But before Christ, 300 and 400 years before Christ, great Greek philosophers, Socrates and Aristotle, were giving us a foundation for humanity, that virtue is actually a really important human aspect in our everyday lives, and all of us are called to just live by these virtues and even have a natural desire, a tendency to want to live from these virtues. And an important thing about virtue is, and the philosophers would say this, that to live a virtuous life meant that not only did you know what was virtuous, but that you lived from that. That you knew what was virtuous and that you lived from that. There's the both and. See, when I was in college, I grew up in the faith. I grew up in a great home. I went to Mass. I had a great youth group. And I went to a public college. I went to the University of Connecticut. And I remember thinking specifically, I wanted to go to a public college so I could really be challenged in my faith, where many of my good friends went to Catholic colleges. Why I thought that? I don't know. Because what I was not prepared for was then really leaving kind of those core values of my faith for a number of years in college. And I was just really tempted and really kind of brought away in many of the ways that the world tries to tempt us as young women, especially in college. So for me, I knew that partying and the lifestyles of partying and of drinking and of staying up really late, like all night, and ordering food at like 5 a.m. and then sleeping my day away on the weekends was not good for me and was not virtuous. And just the relationships I had with men in my life was not virtuous. But yet, I continued to do it. Because when I was in college, it really, to me, I was justifying that it wasn't that bad. And I was doing okay. And I kind of wasn't as bad as some of my other friends or those other people. And I was just kind of surviving in that. And it wasn't until my third year of college when I just started to become a little bit, desiring of more. That in my own heart, I was just saying, God, I'm just not fulfilled in this. I want more out of these friends. I want more from these relationships in my life. And it was kind of at the time that I just had to look at all the girls that I was living with and really surrounding my life with. And for 6 months, I had to say no to every invitation to go out and to go party and to go be with certain people. And it was in that time that the Lord gave me, 1, the space in my schedule, but 2, these amazing women, these amazing friends in my life that have become some of the dearest, dearest friends that I still have today. And what made those friends so different is that what they wanted for me was actually things much greater than just ourselves. They wanted me to get to heaven, and they pushed me towards that. And our friendship wasn't based just on us. There was a higher purpose and a higher meaning to the relationship that we formed. Because a virtuous life, when we are striving to live a virtuous life, it has to start somewhere. So I don't want you to go home and think, okay, I have to live a virtuous life tomorrow. I think Sarah said this too. Like, it's not just gonna happen. You're not just gonna wake up and everything will be virtuous. It starts with one thing. So one virtue. What is one virtue I can grow in? What is one thing? And when we start with that one thing, it actually gets easier when we're kind of mastering the habit of this virtue and have a time to practice it for a second one, and then a third one. And when we become virtuous, this is a pattern. When we're striving for this virtue in our life, it's a pattern that we will see put into play in our life. And we will see that kind of in every area. It will become easier and easier because the nature of our life, the daily practices we're doing, the grace will be built on that. The grace from the Lord will be built on these habits that we're forming to live a more virtuous life. And so in college, it was just really simple. It's like, okay, temperance. I need to say no to these parties and to this lifestyle of toxicity that I knew was not good for me and that ultimately I didn't enjoy, but I tolerated, and say yes to something else that'll fill me. And so for me, it was just, I was meeting these other girls in a Bible study I was in. And at first I was pretty hesitant, but they would invite me to go to Mass once a week or just kind of whenever they went. And I remember really going to daily Mass in college thinking, okay, first of all, who does this in college? Like, do you have nothing else to do with your time besides go to Mass? Because I was like, I've got a lot of friends and I have a lot of things to do, and daily Mass is like for lame people to do. And until I started forming a habit of prayer in my own life, Mass seemed very unattractive and seemed very kind of silly. But there was grace built on the discipline of saying no to something and going to that Mass once a week. And I think there was also the excitement that after Mass, we could go to the best dining hall and have a really good meal, so that always made me really excited about going. But the virtue of that and the grace of that growing in my life it was finally able that I knew what was good for me, and I was starting to really live out of that. When Michael and I got married, we were wanting to really set a budget for ourselves of, okay, this is the money we have. How are we going to spend it wisely? How can we really budget it out? Because when I was single before, I had like the worst self-control. So if I was at a coffee shop and they'd be like, oh, do you want to upgrade that to a large? I'm like, absolutely, I want to upgrade that to a large. Or if there was like a beautiful basket of scones or cookies, I was like, I have to have that. And so I would always be getting whatever I want, whenever I want. And it was like shopping trips, if we're going to H&M or doing whatever. And so when we got married, Michael and I set these rules for ourselves. Okay, we're only going to spend X amount of money on coffee, X amount of money on groceries, X amount of money on shopping. And the shopping category was not as big as maybe I had desired it to be before. So I just remember one day coming home, and Michael was saying, oh, what did you do today? And I was like, oh, I went to H&M with the girls. And he was like, oh, yeah, what did you buy? And I was like, I just bought like a few things. And the reality of having to have to come face to face by telling my new husband that, oh yeah, I just went out and I somehow accidentally just spent like $40 on these new clothes that I probably didn't need. It was like coming face to face with the reality that, dang, I really stink in this. And it was a really good practice because I knew I'd have to, not like a confessional, come face to face with Jesus, but in the sense of like, I have to admit that when I'm wanting to do this or I'm just spending this money that we don't have, that's actually not being virtuous. And it was so good to have his friendship in that because we could really challenge each other then in these areas of that. So when we're living virtue, when we're striving for virtue, in one area of our life, it will flow into the other areas and it will get easier. It will get easier. And I think a lot of us here, maybe too many of us, know and have lived kind of like a starvation diet in our lives, where we're kind of starving ourselves of, depriving ourselves of food or of things, and we're working out like crazy during the week and then eating whatever we want on the weekends, and then Monday comes and we're so unhappy and we're miserable at the pattern we've just created. That's not a virtuous life either. We're called to have a balance in that and a temperance in that, not extremes in our life. So this virtue, when we're growing in it, it will affect us in all of these ways and in small areas and in big areas. But it's so, so important. It's really the foundation for us to finding these great friends down the road. So maybe you're thinking, how does this tie to friendship? So Aristotle said that there's 3 kinds of friendships. And the 3 friendships that we'll see in our lives are, the first one is called a friendship of utility. And the second is a friendship of pleasure, and then the third one is a virtuous friendship. So the friendship of utility. These are the people in our lives that are maybe in a business or maybe an academic setting. So the relationship is defined in a utility friendship off of the goods or services given to both of the other person. So often in business, it's I sell you this and you pay me this, and we have a really cordial working relationship. In college or university, maybe it's people we study with. We have a study group. We study together, we help each other learn, and we're cordial, and we help each other do well in this class. But ultimately, this person is not somebody that I'm going to pour my heart out to and tell everything about my life, right? Or if it's the barista at the local coffee shop you go to, you pay them money, they give you liquid happiness. There's a good working relationship with that, right? So in that sense, utility friendships are okay. And they're actually necessary, so I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, I have all these utility friends in my life, what am I gonna do? That's called people, and there will be relationships in our lives that will be in this category. However, if this was the extent of your relationships in your life, we would all live a really, really unfulfilled life. Because these kinds of people aren't the ones we're inviting into the deep and pouring our hearts out to and talking to and hanging out with on the weekends. They're just the people that kind of are in our everyday circle or in our everyday life, or maybe we see them once a week or every so often. But it's certainly a kind of relationship we will have. The second kind of relationship that Aristotle talked about is a relationship of pleasure or a pleasant friendship. And this is based off of the pleasure or the joy that both parties share with one another or enter into with one another. And I would say that the majority of your friendships are probably in this category. Because for me, the majority of my relationships in my life were these kinds of friends. And they're not always about really sinful things either. So maybe we hear that and we're like, oh my gosh, well, I don't have all these friends that I go out and party with. It doesn't have to be. But it even could just be friends that we're on a sports team with, that we see a lot because we're on a sports team. Or for me in college, I did some volunteer and some service work. During the time when I was kind of searching and looking for more in my life, I decided to sign up for some volunteer service trips through UConn, so they weren't religiously affiliated. But I had these friends that I met, and we liked to volunteer, and we liked to go on these trips together, and it was really good. But it wasn't really pushing me to heaven. And those friendships were fine. But it wasn't really helping me grow to be a saint. Because although we shared these common interests, there wasn't anything else really challenging me in those friendships to be an even better version of than who I was then. And the majority of those friends for me were those party friends I had. They were the girls that I would party with on the weekends. I met some of those college friends. There was about 8 of us. And we all met because we all lived on floor 2 in Russell Hall at UConn. And our freshman year, I just remember meeting them on the first weekend. So for pretty much all of my college years, those were my friends. But the relationship was just based on something shallow. It wasn't really based on what could be the deepest and kind of depths of a real friendship. And so maybe you're thinking about your own friendships right now, and you're thinking, well, yeah, of course I have these people in my life. And I don't want you to be afraid to dream for more. I think a lot of us will stay in this place with pleasant friends or with, good friends. Maybe they're not great, but they're still good. Or maybe they're even mediocre. But we're actually afraid to think about what could be more. What could it be if I dreamt of having deeper friends that really, really knew my heart and really pushed me to be an excellent student or an excellent friend or just excellent in any area of my life? I think we're afraid. I know I was very afraid in college to actually take that choice and to look at those friends and examine those friendships and to say, but if I don't hang out with them, what's going to happen? And so not only do I think we're afraid, I think we as women are our own worst enemies in this. We're so competitive with each other. And social media doesn't make that any easier. Last night during Sister Bethany Madonna's talk, when she was talking about Instagram, I was just sitting there like laughing, crying to myself, being like, oh my gosh, this is Instagram, this is our culture, oh my gosh, this is me. In all of these areas because, we're so competitive with one another. We're almost afraid to let other women into our lives because it maybe will make us seem less popular or less cool, or we're just competitive and we want to be better than these other women. And the thing is, we're probably doing this without realizing it. Because I kind of remember waking up one day and realizing how competitive I was with the other women around me in my life, and not intentionally like trying to tear them down, but just realizing the decisions that I was making and the choices and the way I would interact with them was really rooted in a lack of self-confidence and just a fear that I wouldn't be maybe as loved by others or as well-known or as well-liked, or people wouldn't think I was as funny. And so I wanted to be the funniest and the best and the most well-liked. And so we are tremendously competitive with one another. And so these things that kind of prevent us from achieving and from dreaming even about the depths and the higher levels of friendship, the highest level of friendship, those will prevent us. And ladies, I'm here to tell you that it's okay to be afraid, but you have to be willing to risk it. And the thing is, many of you are probably in college, but forming friends gets harder when you leave college. If anyone is on the lifelong mission track, if anyone's graduated college, you know that when you go leave school and then you work a job, you don't have the freedom and the flexibility like you do when you're in college to have these natural places of encountering people. So if we're not really striving for this virtue, forming these habits, challenging ourselves for higher friendship now, it's just going to be harder. And we actually need these higher, greater friends at all stages of our life. And so the third, and Aristotle said, the highest form of friendship is a virtuous friendship. And a virtuous friendship is a friendship that is rooted and based off of the good for the other. And both people chasing after a goal that is outside of themselves. So socially, we can really achieve this, but in a more Christian context, what that looks like is us pushing our sisters, and I'm specifically talking today about really great female friends, but us pushing our sisters towards heaven and towards excellence. Because, like we know, the Greek word of virtue is excellence, but I'm not talking about perfection. I'm not talking about being perfect. I'm talking about being excellent. And those are two different things, because none of us will ever be perfect. If I got married to Michael and I expected myself to be a perfect wife and a perfect mother to Ignacio, it would never happen. However, if I'm striving to be excellent, that's actually somewhat achievable, because perfection sets a standard way beyond us, and it's often based off of these unrealistic expectations from other people or from what we perceive other people's lives to be like. But we're called to be excellent. We're called to push the women around us towards excellence. So when I found those really virtuous friends, it was really the last 2 years that I would say our friendship blossomed and bloomed when I was in college. And my last year of college, when I was in grad school, I lived in this cottage. We lived in this really cute cottage off campus. Connecticut's really rural, so it was like 1.5 miles from campus, but we had a big yard, had a purple kitchen, and squeaky bedrooms and old floors. It was really, really cute. But what we would do is the girls that lived there, we knew in moving into this house that we wanted this house to be a place where other women could encounter each other really freely and in a lot of fun. So we would host parties, or we would host breakfast, and we'd cook these huge breakfasts? I don't know, breakfasts? What's the plural of breakfast? I don't even know. We would have breakfast on the weekends, and let's just call it brunch. We had brunch. And so we'd cook like a ton of things, scones and pancakes and eggs and like way too much food. And we'd invite people over, and girls would stay all day. And we'd just munch on food, or we'd graze on food all day. And there was this sense that we can invite people into our life without the expectation of expecting those people to be anything for us, and without expecting anything in return. That people could come and they knew that they had the freedom to come and go, but that they also could be themselves. And those girls that I live with, it didn't just start that our friendship was just virtuous overnight. We all met each other. We had all known each other for about a year before we lived together. But one of the first weekends when we were getting to know each other, that first year, we decided to go on a road trip, because who doesn't love road trips, right? So we decided to drive up to New Hampshire to go look at the leaves, also known as leaf peeping, if you're from the Northeast, which is when you go look at the colorful leaves in the fall. If you're from Texas, you have no idea what I'm talking about. So we get in the car, and when you're on a road trip, there's tons of experiences that allow you to grow in virtuous friendship, such as traffic, or such as the one friend that has to pee all the time, and then you have to stop every 30 minutes. It's like, yes, yeah, of course we can stop again for you. Not a problem. So all of these situations, and I would say that weekend, coming home, all of us kind of realized that we had crossed this threshold of our friendship, that what we had allowed ourselves to do that weekend was just have an experience and encountering each other deeper than we could in our everyday life of seeing each other throughout the week. And it was so fun. We had so much fun on this road trip, just frolicking through the leaves and doing whatever and stopping off at random places and every gas station on the way. But it really allowed us in those situations and things like that over and over to grow and to cultivate this virtuous friendship in our lives. Because we weren't competing against each other. We were really trying to build each other up and desire the best for one another. And so for me, in college, that was when I was finally really experiencing that. And before Michael and I moved to Austria, like I said, we got married, and 3 months later, we moved to Austria. So when I was moving there, I was kind of silly, but we were moving to a country where I didn't speak any German. I didn't speak the language yet, but I wasn't nervous about learning German. I had been a missionary in the States, and we were going to be missionaries in a foreign country, and I wasn't nervous about being a missionary in a foreign country. I was most nervous about not having friends. And I just remember being like, oh, Jesus, I'll go, but please let me have friends. Don't let me be lonely. And then I got pregnant shortly after getting there. And so I'm like, okay, Jesus, now we're here, and I'm pregnant. Please don't let me be the weird pregnant lady with no friends. I just was so concerned that God would just all of a sudden abandon me in my life, and I would have no virtuous friends, because I had these amazing women stateside, but I needed friends near me. Although I have all of these friends back here in the States, we need friends close to us that are near us. And you know what, ladies? I found my Stroller Stampede. Because when I got there, I was pregnant, and God gave me the opportunity to meet a ton of other women that were pregnant, all with their first child. They were all around my age, and I started a Bible study with them. And it was really simple, but I was like, oh, would you want to be in a Bible study? And none of them had ever heard of a Bible study. They'd never been in a Bible study, but they said yes. So it started with all of us joining this Bible study a few months before our babies were due. And then one by one, we would have a baby about every month in the group for about 6 months. And then we would see each other for Bible study during the week. And that relationship, those relationships that I still have, the Bible study has been going for 2 years now. Just about 2 years. And those relationships that I've had, Bible study, have become really some dear, dear virtuous friends. Because it wasn't just that we were in this Bible study together, because maybe some of you are in a Bible study on your campus. That's great. But actually, the friendship is going to grow with those girls in that time outside of that. When you're encountering real life together, combining that with how you're both growing and how you're learning and how Jesus is challenging you in that Bible study. So for us, what it looked like was taking our, no joke, Stroller Stampede to the park and having a picnic with all of our babies, or doing things on the weekends together with our families. So now as a mom, it's looked like something that looked different when I was in college and looked different than when I was a missionary. But it's continued to be rooted in something that's greater than ourselves, of that pushing each other towards heaven, of that desiring for the greatest great for each other, not settling for mediocrity. And I can tell these women's lives are being changed just because when we get together, it's like being with family. And watching our children grow together, it's so fun, and it's very hectic, and Bible study's gotten really crazy because it used to just be 8 of us that come. Now there's 16 of us that come, and all the kids are like running on top of each other and pushing each other down to the ground. And so it's really loud. But the thing is, our friendship is growing in all of these really organic moments of our lives. And just the opportunity to enter into that with each other and to have that space and to have that time with each other. So what does a virtuous friendship really look like? Because it's easy for me maybe to stand up here and talk to you about, you need these friends, and they're really, really important. But then what does it practically look like in our lives? I would say a virtuous friendship is a friendship where sacrifice is involved. That you're willing to sacrifice for the sisters in your life around you. You're willing to see their needs and to put their needs above yours in times. But the thing about a virtuous friendship is a virtuous friendship can only be so to the extent that both people are striving for virtue. That's really important. To strive for virtue, to talk about virtue, to emphasize why virtue is important, allows us to be changed, to be transformed, to grow, so that this time when we're meeting people, we can become virtuous. But I can't make a virtuous friendship happen with somebody that doesn't want those things for me. And I think that can be really tough also. Maybe some of you have friends back in your hometown or wherever you go to school, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I would love to really challenge myself to be a virtuous friend to them. But will they return that? will they give that in return? Because as much as we want to pour that out to others, we also can't feel like we're saving the people around us. God didn't call you here to learn all these things to then go feel like you have to go home to all these mediocre friends. God wants you to have really awesome friends. And he wants you to have that in every stage of your life. But especially starting now and today, especially if you're in college, forming these habits and allowing those friendships to bloom and to grow and to take time. So I would say, yes, a virtuous friendship involves sacrifice and involves honesty. And it involves really being honest with yourself, honest with the women around you. I think it also involves just not being afraid to let people into your heart. Because if we're putting up walls, if we're preventing people from really, really knowing us for fear that they're not going to accept us, or for fear that they're going to reject it, or that they're just going to leave us, or that if they come really close to us, that maybe it'll be too competitive, that will also prevent us from really entering into these friendships. And it was certainly in that time in college and then after college, and as a missionary, that in growing in these friendships, I really learned how to love. Love is a choice. I know we hear that, but love really is a choice. And I can specifically look back at some of the relationships in my life when I was a missionary and some of the roommates I had, and really choosing to love them even though I wanted to choke them. But really thinking, like, I will love you in this. And in return, being loved amidst all of my imperfections, being loved amidst all of the annoying things I did. They would call me like the dishwasher Nazi lady, because if there was dirty dishes or things, it could be midnight and my roommates would want to be going to sleep, and I would be up like aggressively scrubbing pans because I did not like waking up to dirty dishes in my house. And they really loved me through that. And so in our friendships, just being okay to just be who you are with the people around you, being who you are and not being afraid of that. I also think a virtuous friendship is a friendship, especially in our Christian life, where people are desiring to grow in their relationship with Jesus. And so this might be a little harder with those friends that are on the outside, those friends that don't have a relationship with Christ, that are maybe far from the church. It's like, how am I going to get them to pray? Well, you know what? First, just invite them. Invite them to a mass. Invite them to an adoration. Invite them to go pray 1 minute in the chapel. Invite them just to walk into the chapel, maybe. In Austria, I got to meet this girl. Her name is Sophie, and she came to Ignacio's baptism. He got baptized in Austria. And when she came, I remember her saying, I haven't been in a church in 15 years. And I was like, dang, that's a long time. But she grew up in a world where culturally everyone around her is Catholic, but there's never been an invitation and there's never been a pull. And so just through our friendship, inviting her in these really small ways, just to come to a mass or to come into the church, or just alone to just encounter Jesus in these really small ways, allowing our friendship to grow as she herself is growing in these own ways of her own faith and her own journey. And I think also a virtuous friendship, the greatest thing about a friendship, and especially a virtuous friendship, is that friendship is the first and foremost kind of basic foundation of relationships that we're going to have in our lives. So when we're small, we have parents who hopefully love us and nurture us. But then after that, we're quickly forming friends, whether that's with our siblings or that's with people around us. And these examples and these people in our lives that when we're little, before we even really recognize what that is, that we're trusting and that we're taking risks with, or that we're telling secrets to, that foundation in our life prepares us for a relationship with God. That a friendship with human people in our lives prepares us for a friendship with God. And yeah, probably we can't think back to those first friends, or maybe if you do think back to the first friends, you probably can't think about how you really met them. Maybe you were so little that your mom and your dad got you together with another friend, family friend of theirs, or your cousins, or even your siblings. But our understanding of friendship, and that's why it's so important that it's virtuous, because if we have eyes tainted on the way that we view our friends, how much more will our heart and our eyes be tainted on the way that we view God? Right? If we're unable to fathom a friendship with people around us, how much more scary would that be fathoming a relationship with God? And actually a friendship with God, not just a relationship, not just like, oh, I know who you are and you know who I am, but a relationship, like you're actually friends with Jesus. And so in our friendships and in our lives, just these things that challenge us and allow us to grow, and especially trust. I think trust is a huge aspect of friendship. We have to be willing to trust the people around us. We have to be willing to kind of take a risk and trust them for who they are, especially if they're desiring themselves and they're challenging you and desiring to grow in that virtuous friendship. But what are the obstacles then? What prevents us? I think it can be jealousy. I think it can be bitterness or hatred, or yeah, like I said, fear, competition. These things will prevent us from really being able to look at the sisters in our lives, the women in our lives, maybe who we've come here with, or maybe who we know back at home. It'll prevent us from seeing them in a way that allows us to grow towards Christ and to be saints. So then how does this all happen? So we kind of talked about what it looks like. How can you pursue a virtuous friendship in your own life? One, like I said, you can't have a virtuous friendship unless you yourself are striving for virtue. So step one, strive for virtue. And it doesn't have to be 10 virtues. It can be, all right, I'm really going to strive for the virtue of temperance in my life. I'm going to start there. And practicing this virtue of temperance, allowing yourself opportunities to practice it, to encounter it. Step two, pray for community. I know for a long time, I no joke, prayed for months before we went to Austria. Like, Jesus, please just don't let me be lonely. Like, that was my prayer. And he heard that prayer. And I just remember one day kind of waking up, I think I was getting ready to go to Bible study and thinking, Lord, you heard that prayer and you knew exactly what I needed. Like, not only did you just send me friends, you sent me the right kind of friends in the stage of life that I was in to enter into motherhood with. Like, oh my gosh, you're really listening to me. Cool. Like, prayer really works. The Lord hears our prayers. He wants to answer those prayers. So especially wherever you are today or whoever you've come with, or whether you're examining your own friendships in your own lives, yeah, pray for good community, like great community around you. Because the Lord wants to answer. He wants to hear it. But the thing is, we have to be the ones, ladies, that create it. So oftentimes, I think all of us want to be a part of a community, but we actually are the ones that are going to create it. And don't be afraid to kind of step out into the deep of that with another friend and say, let's create this community of women around us, of men and women around us. So praying for community, desiring to be virtuous. I also think that we have to just be in ourselves okay being uncomfortable. Forming friendships it seems really easy as a child, and then it just gets more awkward, I think, when we get older. And I only say this because I've experienced this when we get to Austria, especially with the language barrier, not speaking German as I would like. And when I'm trying to explain to someone or talk to someone, I'm like, I think I sound like I'm 4 years old, the way I'm describing myself or my life. And then I'm like, why did I say that? That was so awkward. I'm like, how is this person ever going to call me back? That was like the most awkward thing ever to say. And I think being okay in those uncomfortable situations, we're never going to be perfect with the people around us, right? We're just going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. But the reality is that God has called us into deep friendship with himself And he doesn't want to hold that just to himself. He wants us to experience that profoundly with the women around us. So if you came here with a group of women from your college, if you came here alone, if you came here with people from your parish, if you came here with your mom, pray for those things in your lives and in your relationships. That the Lord can reveal them to you, that you can actually respond with courage and faith and not out of fear for these women and for these relationships in your life. Saint Irenaeus, he was a great saint back in the early days of the church. And he said, the glory of God is man fully alive. The glory of God is man fully alive. Ladies, we're called to live lives that are really fully alive. And I think it can seem scary sometimes in college. It can seem impossible. But I remember just those decisions that I made in college that allowed me to not only encounter God, but encounter the other people he loved, the other people that were pursuing his heart also, those friends that made me fully alive. And it's all worth it. It totally is all worth it. And just inviting you today to not be afraid to live your lives fully alive, to not be afraid to examine those relationships in your own life, the difficulties, the good ones, the bad ones, the utility ones, the pleasure ones, but really striving for those virtuous ones. And the thing is, we're not going to have a virtuous friendship with every person in our life. The barista at Starbucks will probably not be your virtuous friend because it really takes work. It takes effort. And we have to be willing to give it time. And it will come to a point where your relationship will probably cross a threshold. But strive for that. Go for that. Don't be afraid of that. Live lives that glorify God in our own call to be women fully alive. Thank you so much.